I'm Stewart Stewart, your host for Conversations with Stewart Stewart. For the past 30 years, I have had an art studio on Miami Beach. And when friends, and sometimes friends of friends, would come to town, they'd stop by my studio to see what I was working on. As you know, I love to talk to people, and these conversations would sometimes get me to think about things in ways I never considered before. Someone suggested I share them with my audience. Then the pandemic hit. And as a result, I started having these conversations through Zoom. The upside is I've discovered some really unique individuals who are accomplishing amazing things. Some of the conversations are informative and some are just entertaining. They're designed to help you take a break from the stress of your day. So sit back and enjoy Conversations with Stewart Stewart. My guest today, James Redwood. He has a master's in special education. I want to know everything I can about it. I've recognized I've had it all my life. So before we go into some questions about that, can you explain to our audience, what is dyslexia?
Dyslexia is a disorder where, for some reason, and it's not known why, the brain does not connect the symbol or the icon of the letter and the sound of the letter. So when the dyslexic reader and the dyslexic writer goes to read or write a word, and they need to spell that word, or they need to think of how that word would appear and how it should sound, and they go to retrieve specific letters, they don't retrieve the same sound every time. So, and in the English language, that can be particularly difficult because our vowels change their sounds. So we have A, E, I, O, and U, and sometimes Y, right? And they don't always sound the same in every word. And depending on where it's located in the word, what letter is paired with it, or where it's located in a syllable, it changes its sound. So some of our vowels, like OU, that vowel team has 4 different sounds, right? So our language can be complex from that perspective. And so the dyslexic brain, for whatever reason, it doesn't connect that. Now, it can learn to do that, but here's a couple other really good facts. Well, I'm gonna let you ponder that first part, and then tell me what you think.
Well, I'm trying to relate it to personal experiences, that I had. Now, when I was in school, I was the kid whose composition was put on the blackboard so that the rest of the class can use it as a grammar lesson. And when I would read it to the class, there were words that I saw because they had me read it out loud, and they kept saying those words aren't up there.
Yeah.
But yet my brain saw those words and I could speak them to make a sentence sound whole, but it wasn't there.
It's not a language disorder. You're probably, just based off your career as a reporter, you're great with language, right? It's not a language disorder.
I know.
It's a learning disorder specific to reading and writing. But here's the really interesting facts about dyslexia. And I bet this is true with you. About 10% of the population has it, but it's also a spectrum disorder. So that means that you can be a little dyslexic, or you can be severely dyslexic, or anywhere in between, right? People with dyslexia tend to have average to above average IQs. So your overall cognitive ability is at least typically average or higher. Now, that's not always the case, and sometimes people have more than one disability, right? But people with dyslexia and dysgraphia is the same thing, it's just the writing version of dyslexia. So dyslexia is the reading version, and dysgraphia is the writing version of the same thing. So one of the things that happens to people with dyslexia is that they become extremely good problem solvers as they get older. And the reason for that is that when they're young and they're in school, they're not reading and writing in the same way as everybody else. And people who are beyond mild, who have more of a moderate or severe situation going on, they really have to solve problems And oftentimes their ability, like with books in the area of comprehension, is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because they're only getting half the words, but they can still tell you all of the questions. They can answer them all correctly. And so you listen to them read out loud and you're like, boy, that's really bad. But then you ask them a comprehension question and they get it right.
When I was in high school and they had these state exams called regions, and the English regions, you had a choice of answering 50 multiple choice questions about classic literature or writing a composition about something. And I chose to answer the 50 questions. I found a book in the library of Cliff Notes, and I read the plot to every classic I ever heard of. And in the end, I got 48 out of the 50 correct.
Exactly. Look at your problem solving skills in that situation. They're off the charts. A lot of high school kids would never even think to do all of that. But you had already developed problem solving.
Yeah, well, I ran my own business. I was an entertainment publicist who had to write press releases.
Wow.
So I made sure I had a secretary who could take what I do and put it into English that everybody else can see and understand. Otherwise, was something that just wasn't professional enough. How did you get started? What made you pick this particular niche of special education?
So my son was born with rather severe physical disabilities. I had a corporate career at that time, and that was going pretty well. And I was actually pretty comfortable in that role. But with his particular set of disabilities, I was going to need to have a lot of time for him to go through his physical surgeries and his physical rehabilitation. When you have a child with a disability, your mind really opens up in regards to all of these people that have disabilities that really do need help and support, and maybe you're a person who can give that. And so I went about, getting my master's in that and going about and doing that. And I did that for 18 years. When I got into special education and I started working in it, I really enjoyed teaching reading and writing to kids with disabilities. I had this firm belief that there was a better way of doing it than the traditional word-based methodology of teaching.
And what did that belief include?
Wanting the school district to develop a methodology for teaching dyslexic kids. And it was developed by a guy named Samuel Orton. Over a 35-year period, they developed this methodology.
Could you briefly explain what the methodology is to a layperson like myself, so it doesn't get too complex?
They developed a method that relies not just on visual and auditory senses. It adds touch and massive amounts of repetition. Okay, so it's called a multi-sensory approach. But here's the real key to doing Orton Gillingham successfully with students. You have to do it visually, auditorily, and sensory with touch. And the best way it works is when it's all done simultaneously. See it, they feel it, they write it, they draw it, and all at the same time. And if you can do it the right way and with enough repetition, they begin to retrieve the sounds and connect them to the symbols correctly.
Are there any facilities for adults, who discover this later on and just want to know more?
And if you Google Orton Gillingham approach, you're going to find Orton Gillingham practitioners who probably live in your area. I actually think of it as therapy for reading and writing. Orton Gillingham approach, Orton Gillingham Academy, it'll bring you to it and you'll find the list, and then you can find a practitioner that's somewhere near you. There's people all over the United States now doing this.
Okay, that's great. And thanks so much for sharing that information with us. Well, that's our conversation for today. I hope you enjoyed listening, and I look forward to bringing you another conversation with Stewart Stewart. Before we go, I'd like to thank our sponsors for their support in keeping us literally alive on South Beach through the pandemic and through our whole tenure doing the show. Please take a look at our sponsor page. These are what good corporate citizens look like. And if you can, support them so they'll continue to support us, so we can continue to support the community. It's all like a chain. So thank you and have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Until then, have a good time.